Welcome to the Right Here, Right Now show with host Chris Aubert. Right Here, Right Now is a call-in show where you can get your questions answered about life, faith, and today's culture. The show is produced by Immaculate Heart Radio. Now here's your host, Chris Aubert.
This is Terry and Jesse. We're filling in for Chris. Chris is taking some vacation time. And today we're talking about all things Catholic, but specifically I want to talk about today two priests, friends of mine from the San Fernando Valley region of the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. They had two incidents where Middle Eastern men walked into the Catholic Church, and there was actually a violent episode. I want to talk to somebody who knows about this specifically. We're going to talk about it. And this basically segues with two articles that I have here. One article says the number of Christian martyrs have tripled in 2015. Okay? The number of Christian martyrs have tripled in 2015. A lot of people don't realize that. Another article here, how Christian women suffer persecution worse than men. You heard Sosi Ornelas the last hour talking about that. But here, this article is put on by a good Protestant organization called Open Doors. And it says that in 2013, there were some 2,100 Christians that were killed for faith-related reasons across the globe. And last year, get this, last year, 2015, 7,100 Christians were killed for their faith in Jesus Christ. The CEO of Open Doors, Lisa Pierce, she says the persecution of Christians is getting worse in every region in which we work, and it's getting worse fast. Open Doors has worked to help persecuted Christians for over 60 years. It was founded by a Dutchman by the name of Andrew. He smuggled Bibles into Eastern Europe at a time when communist regimes severely restricted Christianity and other religions. And this organization, they work in about 60 countries, and they compile instances of anti-Christian persecution, and they evaluate the global situation of Christian persecution around the world, which I'm glad they're out there. They reported that in 2015, about 4,000 Christians were killed in Nigeria, over 1,200 in Central Africa, and over 700 in Chad in 2015. In addition, over 2,400 churches were attacked or shut down around the world for faith-related reasons. So who are the 10 worst countries on the 2016 anti-Christian list? Number 1, North Korea. Number 2, Iraq. Number 3, Eritrea. Number 4, Afghanistan. 5, Syria. 6, Pakistan. 7, Somalia, Sudan, Iran, and Libya. And over in Iraq, hundreds of thousands of Christians have fled their homes for fear of violence, especially from ISIS. And in addition, here's what we want to talk about in this hour, that some Muslims are becoming stricter out of fear of extremist takeovers or ISIS sleeper groups. That's what I believe we have here in this country. From good law enforcement statistics, we have sleeper cells in this country. And I want to give you some instances where I think they're just right around the corner. But let me just mention one more thing before we bring in our guest. A lot of people have told me, Jess, Muslims are very pious people. They pray 5 times a day. They out-pray Christians. How many Christians, Catholics or Protestants, pray as much as Muslims do? And they bow down, they have prayer rugs. And so a lot of people will talk about Muslim piety. Here's my question. Yeah, it's true that Muslims pray 5 times a day. But the question is, what do they pray? Okay, I'm going to tell you what they pray. I've brought it up here on the internet. It's in Arabic, but obviously it's translated into English. And basically, the Muslim prayer 5 times a day, they follow a very elaborate formula. And their full cycle of prayer includes bowing, kneeling, and reciting certain verses and statements in a specified sequence. They repeat these prayers 5 times a day in Arabic. And here's a strict formula that they follow. Here's what they pray. They say, quote, "Guide us to the straight path, the path of those whom you have favored, not of those who have incurred your wrath, nor of those who have gone astray." Okay? They pray that 5 times a day. Okay, let me break this down for you because it's broken down here in the article where it comes from in the Quran. When they pray 5 times a day on their face, and they're talking to Allah. Allah is the Arabic name for God. They say, guide us to the straight path. What's the straight path? Islam. The path of those whom you, Allah, have favored. Who's those that Allah has favored? Muslims. And they quote the Quran on that. Then they pray, not of those who have incurred your wrath. Well, according to Islam, who's incurred the wrath of Allah? Jews have. That comes from Surah chapter 2, verse 61. It's the Jews, according to Muslims, that have incurred the wrath of God. And then they also pray, nor of those who have gone astray. Who are those who have gone astray? According to Surah 4, verse 44, it's Christians. Christians are in grave error, and we've gone astray. So they pray this 17 times a day, devout Muslims. They pray it, they repeat it 17 times a day. They do it but 5 different times. So here's my question. A lot of people say, wow, they're very prayerful people, but what do they pray? They pray that God keeps them in the straight path of Islam, and they pray that they don't become like Jews who are basically have incurred God's wrath, and they also pray that they don't go the way of Christians. So my question is this. You may say, well, wow, Muslims pray 5 times a day. They really communicate with God. But what they pray really is anti-Christian, anti-Jewish hatred and bigotry. And so my question is, do you think they're communicating with God, or they're basically repeating a poison pill that comes from the Quran?
And I want to also add, if you want to read this for yourself, go to our Twitter account, Terry Jesse Show, and we'll have all these articles. Many times when we do a radio show, we never get to all of the material we have, but you can get it on our Twitter account. If you have a question or a comment, you're always welcome to call us at 888-526-215. And even if you have questions about the faith. Also, I am giving away Dr. Scott Hahn's Catholic Reflections on September 11th and beyond. If you've heard Dr. Scott Hahn, you know he's very informative and very good, easy to listen to. I will give that away if you call 877-526-2151. I'd like to bring on Eddie Chavez. He's a friend of our show. We've had him here before. He has a background in police work and also investigating material. Jess, why don't you give the background on Eddie?
Yeah, Eddie's been a cop for 32 years. He's a retired sergeant from a very large Southern California law enforcement agency.
Yeah.
The last 7 years, he's worked was an anti-terrorism task force. He's worked it with the state officials and also with the federal government. So he's very literate when it comes to terrorism. In fact, he used to, over in the San Fernando Valley, one of his last assignments, he would actually tail terrorists. Wow. He would basically just follow them throughout the day and just basically report to Washington and to the federal government exactly where these terrorists are going from one place to another. Eddie's also told me that California seems to be the biggest hotbed for terrorist sleeper cells, probably in the United States. So we'd like to welcome to the Terry and Jesse Show Eddie Chavez, a retired law enforcement officer who has an incredible knowledge on this topic that we want to talk about today, which is sleeper cells. Eddie, welcome to the show.
Good afternoon, guys.
Hey, good to hear from you, Eddie.
Eddie, here's why we wanted to bring you in the show, because we know objectively that in Africa and the Middle East, Terry and me, we've talked to bishops and priests from the Middle East, where terrorists have walked into Holy Mass, into the Divine Liturgy, and basically wreaked havoc. They walked in with knives or guns or AR-15s, and they shoot people. They kill people. And obviously the Christians in the Middle East and Africa, they can't defend themselves, and they're not allowed to have weapons. Now, we read about those things and we say, wow, what a tragedy. And it is a tragedy. It's awful. It's evil. But now, with the infiltration of so many refugees from the Middle East into the United States of America, and with more of them being slated to come, we're seeing that there's a lot of sleeper cells here in the United States. And you used to actually follow these sleeper cells and used to actually do surveillance on them. My question is, I believe these sleeper cells are going to be coming into Catholic churches here in the United States. And I say that because not too long ago, over in Las Vegas, in the Diocese of Las Vegas, Nevada, there were terrorists going in and disrupting Mass. And this is on YouTube. You can see what they were doing at Holy Mass. There's also been disruptions in Detroit, Michigan. And apparently, you, Eddie, you know of an actual two disruptions that actually occurred in the San Fernando Valley. Can you share with us what happened?
Eddie, before you do that, we're going to take a quick break. This is a great teaser for everybody. Wait until you hear what happened in the San Fernando Valley just the last couple of weeks at Holy Mass. You're going to want to hear this. You're listening to Chris Aubert's show, but it's not Chris. He's taking a little time off. You've got Terry Barber and Jesse Romero, who have a show from 11 to 12, Monday through Friday. Love to have you come and listen to us. We're high-energy Catholics. We have PhDs in common sense, and as G.K. Chesterton would say, common sense is not that common. And we'd love to have you join us. Now, when we come back, we're going to have Eddie answer that question about the sleeper cells and what happened in the two Catholic churches in the San Fernando Valley. If you'd like to get a free CD of Dr. Scott Hahn, you get 2 copies of Unholy War. Just call 877-526-2151. We'd love to give that to you, or you can pick up the whole set. It educates you on the faith. Also, I'm giving away the Book of Revelation by Dr. Scott Hahn. It's a free download. You have a cell phone, text 213-357-2346. Just enter your email only and hit send. We'll send you a link, and you got a $60 set on the Book of Revelation by the famous Dr. Scott Hahn. When we come back, folks, we are going to have Eddie answer that question about what's happening in some of the churches in the San Fernando Valley that should concern us. Don't hesitate to call us, 877-526-2151. Get your free products, and we'll come right back after a quick timeout.
This is the Right Here, Right Now show with host Chris Aubert.
We are stepping in for Chris Aubert, the Terry and Jesse. Chris Aubert is off on some V-time, and we're talking about sleeper cells. We have an expert who used to actually tail some of the sleeper cells here in Southern California. Retired law enforcement officer, sergeant for 32 years in one of the largest agencies in California, working the terrorist task force. Eddie, can you tell us, are there sleeper cells in California, and what happened in the last couple of days over in 2 parishes in the San Fernando Valley?
Yeah, thank you, guys. Great topic again. These concerning incidents occurred in a suburb of Los Angeles, San Fernando Valley. They happened within a couple of weeks of each other. I have to say I did not witness either one of these. One was told to me by my pastor, who did witness it, and the other one by an eyewitness to that incident. So I'll start with the first one that occurred at my particular parish, and that was a mass that had already begun. The congregants noticed 2 men walk in from the rear door of the church, the main entrance of the church. They stood in the center aisle of the church and did not take a seat. These 2 men, as described to me, appeared to be Middle Eastern men. And they stood in the center aisle next to each other, and they were looking around. They had just kind of disapproving looks on their face. They looked around the pews. They were looking at the people in the congregation. They did that for a couple of minutes. Father continued celebrating Mass. There was no disruption of the Mass. And at some point, these 2 men turned around and walked out the main door of the church. That was the first one. Now, within a week of that incident, another more concerning, more serious event occurred at another parish, which, by the way, is probably 5 miles from the first parish. Again, Mass had begun, and the woman who I interviewed was actually there, and she describes a single man come in the back of the church with a backpack. At some point, he walked down the aisle, again, did not take a seat, looked around, walked in and out of a couple of different pews. At some point, this individual, who's also described as a male Muslim, or I should say Middle Eastern-looking individual, takes the backpack off his back extends one hand and holds the backpack out and starts showing the people in the congregation. Now, what I know happened was that everybody kind of ignored the individual. They're hoping that the guy has some maybe emotional issues or something, and that he's going to go away. Father continued celebrating Mass. Everybody pretty much ignored him. So this guy, at some point, walks around the body of the church again with his backpack extended. But as the minutes went by, he begins now to simulate a handgun with his other hand and begins to simulate firing at the congregation. Now, nobody's engaging this guy. People are still hoping that he goes away, that this is, just some individual that has psychological issues. So after a few minutes of that, what happens is this individual now takes that same hand where he simulated a gun, and he takes his thumb and simulates a knife blade, and starts looking at specific members in the congregation and starts using that simulated knife blade across his neck as if to begin to behead some of the congregants. Now, unbeknownst to everybody at this time, somebody that was very conscientious had thought this required police response early on and had walked out of the church and called 911. And so I think one of the very important points of this is to realize that somebody did call 911 and the police were coming. However, there's a lag time, obviously, in whatever city and whatever state of the union here. We know that from the time the call goes in, there's varied amounts of response times that's going to take the police to get to your location. So this incident continues. At some point, this individual engages in conversation with one of the congregants and says, "I'm going to stab you." He then goes into his backpack and takes out a knife. And so now, as time goes on, this thing is escalating and escalating and escalating. He engages one of the congregants with the knife exposed, and as he lunges towards one of the people that are at Mass, attending Mass, a woman sees him walking by and with a hard-covered missile slams it onto the guy's forearm and knocks the knife out of the individual's hand. The people that immediately surrounding him, some of the men surrounding him, tackled him and detained him for the additional couple of minutes it took for law enforcement to get there.
Wow.
And so we have two incidents very close in time and location that occurred that I think that because of what you said earlier, Jess, about these sleeper cells that are very clearly in the United States, in California, Los Angeles specifically, I think we're going to have to consider as a church, as a brotherhood and sisterhood, a family, how we're going to deal with these issues, because what's happening in Africa, what's happening in the Middle East, I believe, is going to slowly begin to occur here.
Eddie, I'm just going to jump in and say, folks, you're listening and you're probably going, what? That wasn't in the L.A. Times. That wasn't on my nightly news. Heck no, folks, you're hearing it here because it's not politically correct to talk about these things. I'm sorry. That's how I see it. Now, if you want to join in on this conversation and ask Eddie a question, or Jesse or myself, call us at 888-526-2151. We're giving away CDs. Why do we do that? We want high information Catholics. You listen to Chris all the time. He gives you great information. We're just going to continue, and we fill in for him to inspire you to fall in love with Jesus Christ deeper and deeper. By helping you do that, we give away CDs by Dr. Scott Hahn. He did a set called Unholy War, 3 CDs. We're going to give the first one out for free. You get 2 copies of it. You share it with your friends and family. Call us at 877-526-2151. I'm also going to give away Dr. Scott Hahn's Bible study called The Inn on the Book of Revelation. It's free. You just text this number, 213-357-2346. Enter your email only, and then hit send, and you'll have a link to this. Let's go to Father Brian in Arcadia. Father Brian, welcome to the Terry and Jesse Show. You're on with Eddie Chavez. Go ahead, Father.
God bless you, Terry, Jesse, and Sergeant Chavez.
Yes.
Greetings, right?
Hello,
and
Father.
Jesse, Hi, you know where I work, so this is something that gets my engines revving at high speed. You know, we need a modern army of crusaders, and the last time I checked, the crusaders didn't wear tutus and leggings. You know, we got to tell the Knights of Columbus, you know, they need to lose their rubber swords and start strapping and packing some serious heat. They need to dump the feathers and put on Kevlar helmets. And we need to unite and retrain Knights of Columbus, Knights of St. Peter Claver, and other Catholic and Christian and Orthodox men's groups into preparedness. And KFC, that's not me knocking fraidy cats, but the King's Ferocious Crusaders. And we need to recruit them. We need to recruit some young men to respond to the call to arms. I mean, if some young radical comes bursting into a Catholic, Eastern, or Oriental Christian church wearing a party popper vest, it's not going to be the same as jumping on a grenade. So we need to organize for church security. We need something instead of the TSA, the CSA. We need the Christian Security Agency.
Father, let Eddie respond because we're running out of on our short time. Eddie, respond to Father's comments, please.
Well, how refreshing it is to hear you say that, Father. I mean, we hear about different parishes that are a little ambivalent about doing something like that, but I think that's the only response we could have as Catholic loving people who love the liturgy and understand that it's at the consecration when Jesus is present where these things are occurring that we need to address the issue more poignantly and have these organizations take charge. We do have to organize. We have to be uniform. We have to be able to know who each other are before the incident occurs. This is what preparation is all about. And once we have the support of the pastor, then we should go forward and organize these things so that they can be addressed before we even need them.
Thank you, Father.
Yeah, Eddie, just like we have federal marshals, and Father, thank you, and we don't know where they're at on the plane, and somebody's always packing. I'm telling you the truth. There's a lot of Catholic cops, retired, active, some Catholics, good men out there that have CCW permits. We need to talk to our pastors. And look at our pastors. Their job is to get us to heaven, but our job, the laity, we're called also to get to heaven. Obviously, we also have to protect our church. Okay, if we don't do it, the clergy's not going to do it. That's not their job. Their job is to do the liturgy and get us to heaven. It's up to the lay people to defend the church. And I'm telling you, just like you have these people, the federal marshals, we need off-duty cops at every single mass, hardcore serious Catholics that are spread throughout the church in every mass, and let the pastor know. So if something happens, you know what? The lay people are going to stand up and say, this is our church. You're not going to do any damage to our church. You're not going to commit any crimes or acts of violence because we're going to stand up and defend it. It's up to us. It's not up to the pastors or the bishop. It has to be a lay-run movement.
There's a reason we're called church militant. Okay?
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. And Jess, you have to realize too is that this is not a ministry where usher. This is going to put a different context to being an usher. Okay? Because what this is going to call for is quick action.
Yeah.
And you and I were at the same mass just at one time where we removed the witch who was intent on desecrating the Eucharist, and we did what we had to do. And there was ushers at that particular mass that failed to take action. So we have to be on top of our game.
Yep.
We have to be organized, play it smart, with the support of the pastor to be able to address this most important issue.
Eddie, we got to take a quick break. If you have a question for Eddie, who's an expert on security, call us at 888-526-2151. That number again is 888-526-2151. We'll be right back after this quick break.
This is the Right Here, Right Now show with host Chris Obear.
This is Terry and Jesse sitting in for Chris Obear. We thank him for allowing us the microphones for these 2 hours. We're talking about really protecting our Catholic churches, the physical protection of the priest, the liturgy, from sleeper cells here in our country. We have an expert, Eddie Chavez, a retired sergeant from one of the largest law enforcement agencies in California, who worked anti-terrorism for his last 7 years of his career. And he actually follows sleeper cells and terrorists for years and stuff. And he's told me for years that California is top heavy with sleeper cells. We actually have some history together. We used to go to Mass together at the same parish when I lived in California. And there was a witch that came into the Catholic Church. How did I know she was a witch? Well, because I did my own intel. Because a lot of parishioners, the pastor sent me. He says, "Can you go and see where a lot of these parishioners are getting these occultic type prayers and these practices that are coming into the parish?" So I did some intel, and down the street, about 2 blocks away from the parish I was at, there was a very popular witch in the northeast San Fernando Valley. I went in there and talked to her, but I acted like a customer, and I basically interviewed her and asked her all kinds of questions. And she was a bona fide witch who taught people how to do hexes and curses and spells. Well, about a week after that, guess what? She walks into Holy Mass at the parish where I was at. And Eddie was there also with his family. And when she walks into the parish, she didn't even dress like, with your Sunday's best. She walked in with like a dress with like veils, like a witch dress, like you'd see on a witch in television. And she had all kinds of candles and dolls and incense in a plastic bag. And she was talking to herself like if, she was you could tell either she's talking to herself because she has some type of demonic contamination or she has a mental illness. Well, the bottom line is when she was going to go to Holy Communion, and I knew she was the neighborhood witch because I talked to her and I said, "Hey, ma'am, are you Catholic?" She goes, "It's none of your business." I said, No. Ma'am, if you're not Catholic, just sit down here. You can pray with us, but you can't receive Holy Communion." And then she said, "Oh, who's going to stop me?" And I said, "Well, you're a witch. You're not Catholic. You need to step outside and respect our services." And I remember the bottom line is I got her to admit, I said, "What are you doing here if you're not Catholic?" She goes, "I'm going to steal your host." And I said, "No, you're not." And that's when me and Eddie stood up right in front of her and we gently escorted her outside the church after she admitted that she came to Mass to steal the sacred host. And so again, as Catholic men, whether you're armed or not, we're called to defend Holy Mother Church. And I'm telling you, if some terrorist would walk in a Catholic church, I don't care if you're not packing. Every Catholic man should stand up and rush that person and say, "Not on our watch." And even if one of us have to die so that our priest can be safe and the Mass can be safe and the liturgy can continue and the tabernacle can remain safe, well, you know what? Then so be it. As Catholic men, we have to put our physical bodies before the priest in the Eucharist.
Yeah, Eddie, this is Terry, and I just want to ask your advice. We've got people asking questions about what we should do. Should we get a guard for the? There's someone calling from Sacramento asking, should we hire a guard during the Mass? What advice, with your police background, what advice would you give to, the guys, mom and dad, and coming with their families? In other words, being aware of your environment, looking around. Should you be aware if something happens? What advice would you give, especially to men, if something happens in church where it's a problem where there's danger for the priest and for the congregation? Give us some advice for the dads that are at Mass.
Well, certainly the normal things are in play here. So yeah. if there's something that you see that's suspicious at your parish, by all means, you need to report it. You need to pass the information on to the pastor. You need to let people know. As far as having a security guard, well, that may be a good idea in some places, may not be practical in others. But we have to remember that whether it be Orlando, Florida, or whatever one of these attacks that occurred in the last few days, there's security guards. There's people that are meant to stop them, and they have not been successful. And so any effort would help. But this is the point I think we should also be talking about is that even in the instances where, for example, this witch that Jess and I escorted out, even this witch who was not for the purpose of any terrorism intent, these things serve to be intelligence for those who would be terrorists, because it gives them information on, number one, how people are going to respond, what's their assessment on what to expect if they do something similar or they do place some kind of attack. And so there's all different kinds of variables in different parishes, but certainly information is one. Being proactive in reporting these things, and then, like Jess says, ultimately, at the end of the day, we have to be willing to be living in a state of grace so that we can take action, whether or not that may mean ultimately to give our life for the Eucharist.
Well said. Eddie, is it a fair statement to say you wouldn't be surprised in the next 6 months if a sleeper cell had, did some real damage in a Catholic church? In other words, with these dry runs that they're doing, is it reasonable to think that this could very easily happen, in a Catholic church as a easy target for these guys? Yes or no?
Of course. These things are rehearsals. That's what they are intended to be. Mm-hmm. And history has shown us that we'd be foolish to ignore what happened. I mean, even the World Trade Center. Yeah. There was a 1993 attack, and they kept going back. This is their MO. Mm-hmm. They keep trying until they're successful. And so what's going to happen, I would think, is that there will be some increased attacks around Los Angeles or other places in the state or the country where you're going to see the Catholic liturgy disrupted by some type of event such as this.
Wow.
And again, Eddie, this doesn't surprise me because this has been happening for centuries in the Middle East and in Africa. And now with so many Muslims coming into this country, again, not all Muslims are bad. We have to repeat that every single time I say that, because I'm going to get hate mail if I don't. The fact is, I thank God that a lot of them don't practice their faith. But the ones that do start reading the violent verses in the Quran, the 164 violent verses that tell you to attack the infidel, that's you and I, and people that take that serious, well, they're the ones that become radicalized and become dangerous. And as Catholic men, again, this is where chivalry comes into play. Chivalry was taught to us by the Crusaders, where they said, you know what, honey? You stay here with the kids. I'm going out. I'm going to do a holy hour, grab my rosary, grab a sword. I'm going to embark the ship, and I'm going to defend the Catholic Church and my family. That's what it means to be a crusader. We have to be willing to give our life for our church, for our family, for our children, and especially for the Holy Eucharist.
Well said. Eddie, we've got more questions for you, brother. And if people want to ask a question on this topic, we're glad to have you call us at 888-526-2151. That's 888-526-2151. And again, for those who haven't heard about our spiritual warfare conference, Jesse and Eddie were talking about a witch. Well, we've got a former Satanist named Zachary King coming July 29th and 30th to the Sacred Heart Chapel in downtown Covina, and it's a 2-day conference on spiritual warfare. You're not going to want to miss this. If you want to join us for that conference, all you have to do is call us at 877-526-2151 or go online to catholicrc.org, and that way you'll have the flyer and it'll tell you all the good things that we're doing. And just to let you know, every 2 months, Terry and Jesse Show, what we do is we put on an event here in Covina to help build the body of Christ up, whether it's a Eucharistic conference, whether it's a Marian conference in August, whether it's a Biblical Studies conference in October, we have Healing of Family Trees in December. Look at our schedule. We're here to build you up in the body, because I'm going to tell you right now, this is the Catholic moment, folks. I'm going to be honest with you. I've been doing this for almost 40 years, evangelizing, and one of the most frustrating things I've seen is where Catholics deny what's going on. They put their head in the sand and say, oh, no, that's not going to happen. I'm just going to have business as usual. And I'm going to tell you, after listening to what Eddie is saying today and our previous guest, this is real. This is happening, and I think we need to respond. I'm giving away Dr. Scott Hahn's Unholy War CDs called Catholic Reflections on September 11th and beyond. You can call us at 877-526-2151. And my biggest gift to Chris's audience is Dr. Scott Hahn's Bible study on the book of Revelation called The End. It's 12 talks, 90 minutes each. It's a course you would have been taught at Steubenville. I'm giving it away. All you got to do is text 213-357-2346. Enter your email only and hit send, and we'll send you a link so you'll be a high information Catholic. If you want to join in on the conversation, that number is 888 526-2151. We're going to take a quick break, but I want you to understand something. We're doing this not to beat anybody up. Why we're doing this is because we're taking a reality check. Our Catholic faith is under persecution. If you look at the results of persecuted Christians in the world, it's at its highest level ever. And this is why we need, as Christians, to have a proportionate response to protect our families and our churches, and especially the Holy Eucharist. That's what we need to do. Before we take the quick break, Jess, your thoughts?
Very clear. The Catholic Church has a doctrine right in the Catechism.
Yeah.
It's called the doctrine of self-defense.
Of course.
Which basically says that as Catholic Christians, as followers of Jesus Christ, we not only have an obligation, we have a responsibility to defend our church and to defend women who are the weaker vessel and children. And so as Catholic men, this is why it's important to evangelize other men so that we can make our churches fill them up with men. You think when a terrorist walks into a Catholic church and looks at 80% of people attending are women, you think a terrorist or a gang member is going to be intimidated? As Catholic men, get off of the couch watching ESPN and get back to Mass and get back to what's really important and stand up for Jesus, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords.
We'll be right back after this quick timeout.
This is the Right Here, Right Now show with host Chris Obear.
Welcome back to the Chris Obear Show. This is Terry Barber and Jesse Romero. We're just filling in for Chris taking a day off. I always tell people we're too blessed to be stressed, too anointed to be disappointed. And if hope was money, we'd be billionaires. We talk about high-energy radio. That's what Jesse said 2 hours ago. I can't believe we're on our last segment. Boy, did it go fast. We're talking with Eddie Chavez, who's an expert on security and taking care of business when it comes to terrorism in our country. He has 32 years of history with a large police force. And
Terry, can I make a quick comment?
Absolutely, Eddie.
I wanted to just comment on something Jess said a little bit ago. He said, we have to be careful we're not beating up a religion, beating up a people, and that's absolutely accurate. Well, we can't have narrow vision, and I say that because of this. Yeah. These radical extremists, they have a strong prison recruitment presence, okay? These people are preaching the Islamic extremism to those that would be open to hear it within the prison system in California and other states. And so not just suspicious things we should report having to do with Middle Eastern-looking men, but others as well.
Yeah.
And so we have to be open-minded in order to get a full perspective on how to better protect our church.
Well said. Eddie, you mentioned something about the prison systems. I go to the prisons on a regular basis to speak to our Catholic men, but is it a fair statement to say that there's major recruitment going on in the prison system with Islam? Because I'm hearing that these guys are coming out and they were nominal Christians, and now they're radicalized Islamic terrorists that are coming out. Now, is that an extreme statement, or am I reading it right?
No, that's a very accurate statement. There's a huge recruitment effort within the California prison system of radical extremist Islam. So yeah, I mean, these people, you talk about a lifelong career criminals who are open to an accepting religion that accepts violence, etc., for some bigger payoff. So it's they're primed to hear it.
So Eddie, what you're saying is they're preaching to someone who wants power and prestige, and they're open to coming into that. I got it. Hey, we're going to get Harold in Oakland, and if anybody wants to join in on this conversation, call us at 888-526-2151. Harold in Oakland, welcome to the Chris Obear Show. We're filling in Terry Barber and Jesse Romero, and you've got Eddie Chavez on the line. Go ahead, my friend. Harold.
Yeah.
Go ahead, brother. We're all ears. What's on your mind?
I just want to say that keep up the good work, man. I really enjoy listening to your program. And I just wanted to make a comment that I think that Saudi Arabia should be taken to the UN, to the World Court for not allowing religious freedom. There should be churches being able to be built, and the Pope should be able to visit the Christians, the many Christians that are in Saudi Arabia, where they are not allowed to build a church. And not only that, but only in Egypt, the persecution of the Coptic Christians who are our brothers in Christ. And all over the world, wherever there's Islam, there's just violence from this religion, and I really believe that Islam is irreformable. It cannot be reformed. It has to be destroyed, much like Nazism. And we have to be able to call a spade a spade.
Harold, I appreciate you calling in on the show. Appreciate your religious freedom issues. And we're going to ask Eddie a question about the idea that there are countries that are closed off to us, but they're not closed off to them. In other words, it doesn't work the same way. And I would just say, Eddie, my question to you as a peace officer, we give people a lot more freedom. Is that a fair statement in our country? Even if people have different views, we try to give them at least the opportunity to have the freedom in our country to practice their religion. But when their religion breaks the law, we have to step in and say, not on our clock. So my question to you is, how do we balance that when we have Islam, people coming in? And I'll ask you this question again. I asked earlier, how do we vet people coming into this country? You're a police officer. Would you want a Islamic terrorist who believes in Sharia law? Do you think that we should let them into this country, or do you think we should vet them and say, no, if you want to do that, you're not coming into our country? That I'm putting you on the spot, and it's a politically incorrect question to ask you. No, it is. I admit.
No,
I admit. What are your thoughts?
No, and we have to be precise about our answer on something like this. So listen, we want to live in a free America. We want everybody to have the same freedoms. That's what our country was based on. And so we absolutely have to allow Muslims to practice Islam. We have to allow Christians to practice Christianity, etc. Okay, and we have an individual who is not a citizen, who would like to come to this country but has committed to Sharia law. Well, that's in direct contradiction with our country's laws and moral standards, so then they should not be allowed in. And so we have to be precise about what we're talking about. Listen, I don't mind if my next-door neighbor practices Islam, but when things cross the line,
yes, I understand.
When all of a sudden there becomes some kind of suspicious behavior, some kind of radical attitude towards Christianity or your government, that's where we draw the line.
Gotcha. Thank you for the answer.
Well, people are hearing the word Sharia law a lot. Let me just tell people what it is in case they're saying, okay, what are these guys talking about?
Good point.
Sharia law is based on the Quran, okay? And this is something that's held by all Muslims. They believe that it's the uncreated word of Allah as dictated by Muhammad. You also have what's called the hadiths. Those are the sayings of Muhammad and the interpretations of Muhammad. Now, Sharia law commands Muslims to carry out jihad, holy war. And this is basically to bring the entire world under the domination of Islam, what they would call the House of Islam. Sharia law also dictates that non-Muslims be given three choices. Here they are. Number one, convert to Islam and conform to Sharia law. Number two, submit as a second-class citizen if you don't submit and you're called a dhimmi. Or number three, to be killed. Now, not all people are given the second option to be second-class citizens. And what's most important is that Sharia law is incompatible with our democracy, because our democracy, it gives us freedom. And any system of man-made law is considered illegal under Sharia law. And so Islam and Western-style democracy can never coexist in harmony, because Sharia law says that the Quran supersedes anything, the Constitution, the Declaration, anything, the Ten Commandments. And so this is oil and water, and they are completely incompatible.
If you'd like to get a copy of today's show, I'm willing to give 2 copies away for free. You just pay the shipping and handling by calling 877-526-215. And I just got a note here. Raina down in the San Diego area said at the Mission San Luis Rey, they had 2 Middle Eastern gentlemen confront the priest at Holy Mass there. I bet you it's happening more often than not. I'm just going to give a statistic that everybody's going to be stunned by, and then I'll go to Diana. I got this from Larry Elder. He told me this. He said that 1.1 million times a year, somebody who's packing a gun stopped a crime from taking place. That's a phenomenal statistic. I've never heard anybody else say that. Now, I'm not saying everybody's got to be carrying a gun. I'm just saying that when things get out of hand and somebody's going to shoot somebody, It's nice to know that there's an off-duty cop or someone who's got a permit to carry a gun can take care of proportionate measures with that person and stop the killing of innocent life. And that's what Raina just mentioned here. Let's go to Diana in Las Vegas. Diana, welcome to the Chris Aubert Show. Terry and Barbara and Jesse Romero are filling in today. And we have our good friend Eddie Chavez, who's an expert on terrorism, on the line. Welcome, Diana.
Yes, I just wanted to make a comment
Sure.
that we had Muslims showing up in the parishes in Las Vegas.
Okay.
And we were alerted by the office. I'm a sacristan at one of the churches, and I just wanted to say that they did show up at our church. They showed up at a neighboring parish, maybe a few miles away, and I'm not sure of any other places or churches, Catholic churches, that they did show up at. But they were escorted out, and it was talked about on the news.
Gotcha.
And they were trespassed. And after they had talked about it on the news, it had quieted down. But we're still on alert.
Thank you.
And I just want everybody to know, like they said earlier too, it's all our responsibilities to protect our church.
Amen. Thank you so much for your call. Yeah. We're out of time again, Eddie. Eddie, thank you for joining us. Do you have any final thoughts, any advice to our listeners?
You know what? This is a problem, Terry, that needs to be addressed spiritually and practically.
Amen.
And so besides all the steps that we're talking about today, putting into place to protect our parish and our priests and our people, we have to be involved in prayer. And we have to pray that God converts these souls and keep doing what you guys are doing. Great
all right,
segment.
brother. Thanks,
Amen.
Eddie.
Thanks, brother. As this one Vatican cardinal said, we have to convert Islam. That's what we have to do on a spiritual front. We have to convert Muslims to Christianity. I know there's secular progressive Catholics that'll say, oh, we don't convert anybody after Vatican II. Every religion, just live and let live, like the old Beatles song. Nope. not in the Terry Jesse Show.
No.
We follow what Vatican II actually says, not the spirit of Vatican II, which doesn't exist. And Vatican II says we have to evangelize the whole world. And beyond Vatican II, somebody way greater than Vatican II said we have to evangelize the entire world. His name is Jesus Christ, the Son of God. And so as Catholic men, you know what we need to do? We need to become holy or die trying. And it's time for us to get off our couches, put your beer away, turn off the television, quit watching ESPN. We got to get holy. We got to lead our families to Christ. We've got to get to Mass, and we've got to protect our churches. We've got to protect our priests, and we've got to protect the Blessed Sacrament.
Well said, Jesse. I want to encourage you one more time to call 877-526-215 and get Scott Hahn's CD set, Unholy War. We'll give you 2 copies for free. You just pay the shipping. And if you want to get today's show and get 2 copies for free, call us at 877-526-215. And remember, we're on at 11 o'clock tomorrow. Hope to have you come with us. May God richly bless you.